There's an invisible force guiding the deepest encounters of our lives. In a world marked by missed connections, shallow bonds, and fleeting loves, something eludes logic and defies time. The feeling that certain souls simply belong together. No matter how hard they try to drift apart, walk different paths, or hide behind masks, these souls always find their way back to each other. Some call it destiny, synchronicity, or luck, but Carl Jung offers a deeper, more transformative perspective. What happens when two people unconsciously mirror one another, and what makes that reunion inevitable? Get ready to dive into a journey through the human soul, where love is not just an emotion, but a reflection of individuation. If you believe that what is true can never be separated, leave a comment saying what is real returns. For Jung, meaningful soul encounters aren't mere chance, but expressions of a profound psychic dynamic. The theory of individuation, the process of becoming who we really are, implies that in intimate relationships, especially romantic ones, we project our own unconscious aspects onto the other. That means the soul we feel is destined isn't just a romantic partner, but a living mirror of everything we long to integrate. At the start of such a relationship, projection runs high. We see in the other all we've repressed or yearn to become. It's the archetype of anima and animus at work, inner feminine and masculine figures within each of us. When two people meet under these complementary projections, there's a sense of completeness, as though they've finally come home. This magnetism can be so strong that separation feels unnatural. But as the relationship deepens, confrontation with the shadow becomes unavoidable. The pain of separation, the crises and misalignments, all are parts of the integration process. And here lies the mystery. If both souls are truly committed to individuation, reunion isn't just possible, it's necessary. Because this isn't about idealized love, but a transformative bond. According to Jung, what is repressed always returns. And what is true in the soul, even when fragmented, tirelessly seeks reintegration. Thus, these souls don't seek each other out of need, but because together they complete the journey toward wholeness. There's a silent force operating behind the scenes of the most intense relationships: projection. Jung described this as the psyche's natural tendency to attribute our unconscious contents, images, desires, wounds, and as yet unrealized potentials to another. When two souls meet and seem to recognize each other instantly, that overwhelming attraction often springs from mutual projection of psychic contents. In such cases, love doesn't begin with seeing the other as they truly are, but with an idealized image built from what is missing or dormant within us. At the outset of a deep love, this projection is inevitable and even necessary. We see in the other qualities we fail to recognize in ourselves: courage, sensitivity, wisdom, beauty, strength. We fall in love not just with that person, but with the promise of becoming more whole through them. This initial phase is rich with enchantment because it creates the illusion of completeness. It's when the unconscious clamors for expression and uses the other as a canvas to display what needs to emerge within us. However, projection, if left unacknowledged, carries its own trap. The more we deposit parts of ourselves onto another, the more vulnerable we become to disillusionment, frustration, and rupture. Eventually, the idealized image collapses, exposing the real human being with limits, flaws, and contradictions. When that happens, many believe the love has died. In truth, that is the real starting point. It's at this precise moment that love can move out of fantasy and become real, when we stop loving the projected image and begin to see the other as they truly are. Jung believed the deepest relationships are those that survive the fall of projections and endure the pain of confronting psychic reality. Because when two people acknowledge their projections and choose to look within themselves, something extraordinary happens. Each begins to reclaim what they had placed in the other. This is the beginning of individuation, the process of becoming whole, catalyzed by a loving bond. The soul we sense as destined is actually an external manifestation of what we internally yearn to develop. The feeling that we've known someone forever may be an unconscious expression of inner recognition, as though something lost within us vibrates at finding its mirrored image outside. This synchronistic experience is more than romance. It's a summons to transformation. Projection isn't a mistake, but an invitation. It shows us that something deep is trying to surface through the relationship, yet remaining trapped in illusion keeps that something from fully realizing itself. That's why love born of projection must evolve into conscious love, where both partners take responsibility for what they see in the other, and above all for what they feel within themselves. Loves that begin this way, profound, magnetic, almost inexplicable, carry the potential to catalyze consciousness. But that only happens when projection ceases to be unconscious and becomes a tool for self-knowledge. The other ceases to be an idol and becomes a real companion, imperfect yet essential on the path of mutual growth. Thus, understanding projection is understanding why we feel unable to escape certain people. They represent parts of ourselves we cannot abandon because they are too precious, too painful, or hold the keys to our own awakening. According to Carl Jung, the shadow represents everything we have rejected, repressed, or forgotten in ourselves, qualities deemed unacceptable, shameful, or painful, but that continue to exist in the unconscious. In the most intense relationships, especially those we feel are destined, the shadow plays a central, often disturbing role. Love that seems to transcend logic, and time carries not only the beauty of reunion, but also the challenge of confronting what has been banished from our awareness. These deep encounters don't exist to comfort us, at least not entirely, but to transform us. When we meet someone we feel is part of our own soul, we face a mirror reflecting not only our light but our darkness. The shadow is not merely the negative, it is the repressed wholeness. And the stronger the connection, the more likely this other will reveal our blind spots. At first, everything feels harmonious, as if the two fit perfectly, but over time, conflicts, friction, and wounds arise. Many relationships break at this point. Yet when there's a genuine bond and a call to individuation, this turbulence isn't an end, but a necessary transition. The destined soul, the one that returns, is the one with the courage and the love to stay through the passage of the shadow. Destined encounters activate the shadow because they bring us into contact with what needs healing. Anger, jealousy, fear of abandonment, desire for control, insecurity, shame. All these emotions emerge not because the other provokes them, but because they trigger contents already within us, waiting for a catalyst. In that sense, these relationships can't be easily avoided or erased. They beckon us inward. Jung said no one becomes enlightened by fantasizing about figures of light, but by bringing darkness into consciousness. And this process rarely happens outside relationships. The other has the power to touch our wounds with almost mystical precision because they embody something beyond the ego. They personify the unconscious that demands integration. Thus, relationships that feel predestined are in fact alchemical laboratories. In them, light and shadow clash intensely, and if both are willing to endure that fire, they emerge transformed. The shadow is also the domain of unrealized potentials. Often, what we criticize in another is precisely what we wish to develop in ourselves. A bold person may unsettle someone who fears exposure. An emotional person may irritate someone numbing themselves. In the context of deep love, these shadow projections become unbearable because the other embodies what we deny in ourselves. The feeling that we can't forget them or move on may arise because the lesson hasn't yet been learned. The soul will not let go of what still needs integration. This is the true role of the shadow in transformative relationships, forcing us to see the pain of separation, the drama of misalignments, the frustration of unmet expectations, all part of the confrontation with what we hide. Paradoxically, it is through this process that love deepens. To love someone despite the shadow, to recognize in the other a mirror of our own pain and still remain, is an act of courage and psychic maturity. It's no coincidence that many souls who reunite throughout life only experience full love after passing through great crises. The shadow must be confronted for love to cease being need and become consciousness. When that happens, the relationship stops imprisoning or projecting and becomes a partnership for growth. No longer two halves in search of completion, but two whole beings willing to walk together. At the heart of Jung's analytical psychology lies the understanding that every human carries both masculine and feminine aspects within. He named these inner principles anima and animus. The anima represents the feminine archetype in a man's psyche, while the animus represents the masculine archetype in a woman's. These figures are not just symbolic, they serve as bridges between unconscious and conscious, shaping how we relate, fall in love, and project. When two souls meet and experience a love that seems larger than life, what is at play is not just physical attraction or emotional compatibility. It's the unconscious recognition that the other embodies our anima or animus, meaning they represent what lies dormant or underdeveloped in our psyche. This kind of love transcends the ego because it activates the internal totality we haven't yet achieved alone. Throughout life, we form our identity from the gender we identify with, repressing its opposite into the unconscious. A man, for example, may cultivate rationality, strength, and objectivity, but suppress sensitivity, intuition, and receptivity, qualities attributed to the feminine. These qualities don't disappear, they become part of the anima. The same happens with the animus in women. When we meet someone who awakens these qualities, we feel a deep, almost mystical call. We sense we've known this person from somewhere, because in fact, they have always lived within us. This encounter is not only with the other, but with parts of ourselves that never had space to flourish. The sense of completeness arises from the fact that through the other, we get the chance to become more whole. The love born between souls that cannot forget each other is often the love between the conscious self and its complementary archetype. When this bond manifests externally, the desire for union is not just emotional or sexual, it is psychic and spiritual. Yet anima and animus are also sources of idealization. At first, we project onto our partner everything we believe we lack: salvation, answers, perfect fusion. This idealization can create enchantment, but also entrapment. If we don't recognize that we're dealing with internal images, the other becomes an idol, and we lose sight of who they really are. The collapse of this projection can be painful, but also liberating. It's when we stop seeking in another what can only be found within ourselves. For Jung, true growth happens when we withdraw these projections and begin consciously dialoguing with anima and animus. That means integrating previously repressed qualities. The man opens to his intuition and vulnerability. The woman recognizes her reason and power to act. When both partners go through this process, their relationship transforms. It ceases to be dependent or conflictual and becomes a partnership between two wholes. Love no longer serves as an escape from loneliness, but as a space where each continues becoming who they are. Souls that reunite and cannot fully separate usually represent this archetypal dynamic. The other becomes the messenger of the unconscious, and their presence activates an inevitable inner journey. Even when apart, the bond remains because it doesn't depend solely on physical presence, but on the psychic transformation that was initiated. And until integration completes, something in us remains tied to that soul, not out of attachment, but out of a need for wholeness. This is the deepest reunion, not just between two people, but between the inner principles they represent. Anima and animus drive us toward individuation, using love as a catalyst. So the one we love deeply, the one we feel inseparable from, is both mirror and guide to our own awakening. In Jung's analytical psychology, individuation is the central process of self-realization, the psychic totality that transcends the ego and integrates all aspects of being. Though intensely personal, this path doesn't unfold in isolation. On the contrary, it's continually activated and accelerated by relationships, especially those that touch us deeply. When two souls meet and seem unable to disentangle, what's at stake is more than an emotional bond. It's the dance of shared individuation. Individuation isn't cold independence, but profound self-knowledge. On this path, the other becomes a living mirror, revealing who we are, not just who we'd like to be. When a love awakens both our most authentic and darkest sides, it ceases to be merely a relationship and becomes a passage. Souls that appear destined actively participate in each other's transformation. It's as if one's presence triggers the other's inner movement, unleashing revelations, crises, and healings we couldn't achieve alone. Jung noted that in many cases, these souls can't stay apart for long, not out of dependency, but because there is unfinished work between them. Something in both psyches remains open, and that unfinished draws, insists, and persists. The bond between two people sharing the path of individuation is unlike an ordinary tie. It rests not only on romance, but on psychic coevolution. That's why, even after distances, ruptures, or long silences, a force pulls them back together. This force isn't merely emotional. It's symbolic and archetypal. The other holds keys to inner doors we can't open alone. They aren't what completes us, but what confronts us with what needs to be seen, accepted, and integrated. When two people recognize this, even intuitively, they become companions in a journey of continuous transformation. Sometimes reunion isn't physical but internal. The image of the other remains alive, acting in the psyche as a living symbol of what we still need to achieve. Some relationships last briefly, but leave eternal marks. Others endure through years despite intermittent separations. When a bond activates individuation so deeply, it defies the linearity of time or conventional logic. It persists, it insists, and sometimes it returns, because something still needs living, learning, and re-signifying. This kind of reunion isn't a return to the same point, but an upward spiral. Each new coming together happens at a higher stage of consciousness. Past wounds, once understood, become bridges. Fallen projections, once integrated, transform into wisdom. And love, once idealized, becomes conscious love, one that respects the other's pace, honors both freedoms, yet at the same time acknowledges the depth of the tie that unites them. Shared individuation doesn't mean fusion, but mutual presence in the work of becoming whole. The other doesn't save us, but walks alongside us as we save ourselves. That's why, when the soul recognizes that journey in another, the bond doesn't break easily. It may change in form, intensity, even location, but never in essence. Ultimately, it's the soul that recognizes the soul, and that recognition is older than the couple's own story. Maybe that's why when two people are linked by that invisible thread of mutual transformation, neither time nor distance nor mistakes can fully erase what has been awakened. Because what is being born there isn't just love, it is consciousness, it is expansion, it is the soul's return to itself through the other. When souls share individuation, their reunions stop being accidents and become inevitabilities. They don't find each other because they can't live apart, but because there's a truth that can only be lived together, even if slowly, even with pauses, even through pain. That union happens at the level of being, and at that level, nothing is coincidental. Some connections don't follow the logic of the external world. They spring from a deeper place, where soul meets soul and love becomes an instrument of self-transformation. When two people encounter one another with that intensity, it's not just about affinity or desire. It's the living manifestation of the individuation journey, a call that echoes beyond time, beyond conscious choices, beyond reason. What seemed like romantic love reveals itself as a symbolic path. Projections fall, the shadow emerges, anima and animus dance around the self, and reunion becomes a symbol of the quest for wholeness. There's no escaping this kind of love, because it's not built only on affection but on meaning. The other isn't an obstacle nor a savior, they are a mirror, and once we see ourselves there, whole, wounded, and real, there's no turning back. If this message has touched something inside you, subscribe to the channel right now. Here, every video is a symbolic journey toward consciousness, and if you want to keep diving into this universe, watch the video appearing on your screen.